annexation, and competing visions. The U.S. invasion of Puerto Rico in 1898 marked the start of a profound restructuring of Puerto Rican identity within a U.S.-imposed racial order. In the aftermath of the Spanish-American War, the United States viewed Puerto Rico not as a future sovereign nation, but as a permanent territorial possession. New York Times, July 11, 1898, an island well worth having, the real gem of the Antilles. Twice as many people could live there in ease and comfort. There can be no question to perplex any reasonable mind about the wisdom of taking possession of the island of Puerto Rico and keeping it for all time. In contrast, Puerto Rican independence advocate Eugenio Maria de Hostos warned, Hostos, 1898, "Neither I nor any other Puerto Rican patriot and Republican would like to see the American people violate their mission as a great democratic nation by forcing our native island to become a dependency instead of assisting it to shake off the yoke of its Spanish oppressors and then leave it to build up its own independent government." These competing visions shaped how Puerto Ricans would be racialized and politically positioned in the new imperial relationship.
U.S. imperialism and the imported color line. Under Spanish colonial rule, Puerto Rico functioned within a fluid color continuum, multiple racial categories based on phenotype, ancestry, and social status. Following the U.S. invasion, this was replaced by the black/white binary of the Jim Crow South. Rodriguez 2000. Immigrants immediately underwent a racialization process, acceptance of and participation in discrimination against people of color, and negotiations regarding the group's placement in the U.S. racial ethnic queue. These shift erased intermediate categories recognized under Spanish rule, forcing Puerto Ricans into rigid U.S. census categories, white or black. On the mainland, phenotype, surname, and accent became markers that triggered discrimination, even for those who appeared white. Anti-blackness, blanqueamiento, and mestizaje. Spanish-American racial ideology also shaped Puerto Rico's internal dynamics. Hernández. Blanqueamiento, at an individual level, is the desire for a white appearance. At the national level, blanqueamiento describes a state-sponsored campaign to whiten a population and valorizes whiteness. Mestizaje is the belief in racial mixture to lighten the complexion of a nation, but it often excluded blackness or framed it as something to be diluted. Under U.S. rule, these ideologies intersected with the imported color line, allowing some Puerto Ricans to navigate toward whiteness while reinforcing anti-black hierarchies that marginalized Afro-Puerto Ricans.
Colonial citizenship and second-class status. The United States gained possession of Puerto Rico from Spain in December 1898. The Treaty of Paris, December 10, 1898, transferred sovereignty, and U.S. military rule began October 18, 1898. In 1917, the Jones-Shafrath Act granted U.S. citizenship to Puerto Ricans, but without full equality. Rodriguez 2000. In New York City, Black and Hispanic immigrants continue to live in the least desirable housing, pay among the highest percentages of income for rent, and have the lowest rates of home ownership. Hispanics and Blacks have less access to medical care, higher crime rates, and greater concentrations of poverty and housing code violations. Individuals clearly identified as Hispanic experience greater job discrimination. Following the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act, many were denied jobs because employers assumed they might be undocumented. On the island, U.S. colonial authority remained intact. Findlay 1999. Most students of the Island's history assumed that after the abolition of slavery, racial differences became irrelevant. Those who argued otherwise were effectively marginalized.
The census and the hardening of the color line. Rodriguez 2000. By 1830, the color line was clearly established. The major divisions were now explicitly colored, whites, who were free, and coloreds, who were free or slave. After 1820, culture, language, religion, and mixture were compacted into a choice between white and colored. This rigid census framework was imposed on Puerto Rico after 1898, replacing these lands' nuanced racial continuum with a definitive white/non-white divide.
Resistance and identity formation. Puerto Ricans responded through political, cultural, and community organizing. Nationalist movements on the island, inspired by Hostos, advocated independence and cultural preservation. Diaspora communities formed hometown clubs, labor unions, and mutual aid societies to resist discrimination and affirm Puerto Rican identity. While some pursued assimilation through blanqueamiento or mestizaje, others rejected whitening ideologies, confronting both U.S. racism and local anti-blackness.
Conclusion. From annexation onward, Puerto Ricans were positioned as colonial subjects in a racial system that both drew on and reshaped existing anti-black hierarchies. The imposition of the U.S. color line, the persistence of whitening ideologies, and the contradictions of second-class citizenship ensured Puerto Ricans were racialized as non-white under U.S. norms, denied full equality despite citizenship, and compelled to navigate between colonial subordination and cultural resistance. This dual positioning, colonial yet American, inside yet outside the white/non-white divide, defined their racialized experiences in both Puerto Rico and mainland U.S. cities during the early 20th century.
For today's broadcast, on August 15, 2025, we investigated the racialized experiences of Puerto Ricans under the color line during the early 20th century, particularly following the U.S. invasion of Puerto Rico in 1898 and into the Jim Crow era, while exploring how Puerto Ricans, despite being granted U.S. citizenship in 1917, were treated as second-class citizens both on the island and the mainland. We delved into how U.S. imperialism, anti-blackness, and racial hierarchies impacted Puerto Rican identity, and how processes like blanqueamiento, whitening, and mestizaje, racial mixing, were used to navigate, reinforce, or resist white supremacy, clarifying how Puerto Ricans were simultaneously racialized as non-white colonial subjects, and used to maintain racial boundaries in both Puerto Rico and U.S. cities like New York.